We continue to celebrate Black History Month, featuring a series of video interviews of some of our Black brothers and sisters. They tell their stories and share their experiences and reflect on how God has helped them on their journey. This is a chance to get to know them better and be inspired by their struggle and what they've learned. Let's take a look.
Hi, my name is Kareema Thompson, and I'm part of the Youth and Family Ministry. I grew up in a town called Meriden in the state of Connecticut. You know, my parents sacrificed a lot for me to be in the sport of gymnastics, so that was a huge part of my childhood and growing up. I got into gymnastics because my parents said I used to just jump around the house and off jump around on the couches and things like that. So they put me in tumbling classes. So that's really how I got started. I was in gymnastics at UCLA. I got a full scholarship to attend UCLA, and it was amazing. You know, just it's different from a club sport. You're more individualized when you're in a club versus at a university. It's more team. It's not very individualized. It's more of a team sport. So it really taught me how to be a team player. Growing up as an African American, I don't think I really thought about it as much. I think the experience came more in gymnastics because at the time I was a gymnast, there weren't many minorities to begin with, but not many Black gymnasts at all, because I didn't have the body type or even the skin color of most gymnasts at that time. So I think that's where I experienced more discrimination and racism, and just having to work twice as hard to prove myself than some of my other teammates. For me, it's teaching both of our kids, but mainly my son, to be in a sense obedient, to listen to instructions. You know, if somebody's asking you to do something, to follow those directions. Because it could mean a matter of life or death for you. And just taking a breath before you do anything, but just listening to whatever somebody asks you to do. It is disheartening that we have to have these conversations with our kids. I don't recall my parents ever having that conversation with me. Growing up, I think a lot of it maybe had to do where I grew up. Connecticut, I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly white. So I wasn't surrounded by, a lot of, gangs or, that type of, lifestyle. But it is disheartening that I have to teach my kids that, but it's reality, and I want them to be prepared. When I think about how African Americans have contributed, I think, I'm going to stick to what I know, and that's gymnastics. And I think everybody knows Simone Biles, but there were so many others that came before her. I mean, you had Betty Aquino was one of the, the first ones, Gabby Douglas and, some others in between. But I think they've just paved the way for people like me, and other, African Americans who see these girls and women and they feel like they can do it. If they've had their shot, I can do it too. And I think for me, that's inspiring. And I think it's inspiring for a lot of young girls growing up to see that, hey, I can do that if they can do it too. I didn't grow up going to church, actually. I didn't really know much about God. I think as a high schooler in high school, I was interested, and I would wake up Sunday mornings and find whatever church channel that I could and listen to that. So I think I was always interested in knowing more about God and Jesus and the Bible. I had my little book of Bible stories and a old King James version on cassette that I would listen to. But it wasn't until when I came out to UCLA as a freshman, I was walking back to my dorm. We had just gotten all our gear for gymnastics because we had a meet coming up, and somebody had stopped me and invited me to church. And so from there, I was studying the Bible. It took me a while, that first year I started to study. A lot of the disciples came out and supported me at my meets and different competitions and stuff. But it was just really hard with being a freshman, and an athlete, and trying to live the life of a disciple in the beginning. And so I had stopped studying for a little bit, and one of the girls that I knew had invited me out again over the summer, because I stayed at UCLA to go to summer school, and started studying the Bible again, and was baptized in July of 1992. Something in the character of Christ that I admire, there's there's many, but two of the things that I think of the most are just his humility and his ability to teach forgiveness. I think having both of those is what will help us be unified. With humility, we're thinking of others and thinking how we can serve others and thinking what we can do to help. And I think with that humility allows you to forgive. And I think if we as a society can hold on to those two things and teach those things, I think we'll be able to be more unified and be able to live with differences and live with different cultures and live with different races and be able to get along. Be a neighbor, looking to be a friend, and see how we can help and what we can do to be friends, really. And I think by being humble, you're able to forgive. You're able to look past someone's faults of how they hurt you. But that takes humility, and I think Jesus is the ultimate person. He died for us so that we could have, a relationship with God. So I think those are some of the things that in his character that really inspire me to want to be better as a person.
I'm Richard DeVance Thompson, and I'm part of the Youth and Family Ministry. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. So I grew up in Cleveland from 0 to age 14. Cleveland is not a diverse city. Mainly we were blacks and whites. Blacks lived on the east side, whites lived on the west side. Kids from the west side were bused to the east side or vice versa. So usually grades like 1 through 3 were bused to the east side. And then from 4 to 8th grade, I was bused to the west side. Back in the 80s, I was a latchkey kid. So I would have to walk to school in rain, sleet, or snow, no matter what, and didn't bother me. But getting bused, getting up earlier and have to go through those extra steps, it kind of did, and I didn't understand it. I remember as a kid in Cleveland being followed with my parents picking out toys for Christmas. And back in those days in the 80s, I loved G.I. Joe. And I remember my mom's like, "You need to put that down." She's like, "Somebody's watching us." And I'm like, "Huh?" It was my 5th grade teacher who was just kind of discriminating against me. We were doing the Pledge of Allegiance and we walked in. So I was taught from my parents is when you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance or somebody's praying, you're supposed to immediately stop what you're doing and stay still. So of course I did that. And my 2 other friends kept walking right in. And the difference was I was black and they were white. And so after they did the Pledge of Allegiance, he kind of asked me, he's like, "Well, why did you do that?" And I was like, "Oh, you're supposed to do that when you do the Pledge of Allegiance or somebody's praying. I was taught you're supposed to stop." He just kind of treated me differently from all the other kids. And it wasn't until my mom kind of got involved. She was that dedicated to me making sure I got an education. So in 5th grade, she definitely sat in the class and she can kind of see some of the difference on how the teacher was treating me. I moved to California back in June of 1990. My mom married her childhood sweetheart. It was a big change. Seeing people wearing shorts and t-shirts, to me, that's just weird. Because in school in Cleveland, we weren't allowed to wear shorts to school. That was an automatic, you got sent home. Or you went to in-day suspension. So going to Inglewood High School, seeing kids wearing shorts to school was a huge shocker to me. I'm used to wearing a suit to church on Sundays. Here it's come as you are. Mm-hmm. And also other thing about moving to California is also knowing the gangs, because my stepbrother went to the school a year beforehand and graduated. So, he kind of took me under his wing when we moved here to LA. And he introduced me to different people at the school. It's like, oh, that's your younger brother. So people kind of knew, oh, you don't mess with Richard. That's Keith's younger brother. And then one of the years, the first year we had a school riot, I remember some of the gang members actually escorted me out of the school because they didn't want anything to happen to me. And they're like, you shouldn't be here. You need to go. And, they took me out of the school. So I was visiting Fisher-Price for about 2 weeks on a business trip. And as a kid, growing up in Cleveland, we would go to Toronto in Canada, since it's not that far. So I was like, I'm in Buffalo, New York. It's a half day on Friday. I'm gonna go to Toronto. So when I came back to the US border, the border customs agent started asking me a whole bunch of questions. And then when he asked me how much money do I have to declare, I was like, I don't need to declare anything because I'm not bringing back $10,000 in US currency, so there's nothing to declare. The only thing I have to declare is I bought pins and some souvenir cards for my girlfriend and my people in my Bible talk. So why are we having this conversation? You're stopping because I'm Black and I'm driving this car. It's a rental car. I'm here on a business trip. I think music has definitely influenced our culture, and it's actually influenced the culture around the world. So, and even brought some music, which might be quote unquote inappropriate, but also brought notice to some of the things that are going on in the world. Back in those days, the early 80s and 90s, and how it was just taboo. It's like, oh, the police don't do anything. For the people in the Black community, they knew it, they saw it on an everyday basis, but in other cultures, they might be quote unquote bumping the music, but they don't understand exactly what's going on there. But even those rap groups back in those days were saying what's going on in the streets, but people weren't willing to hear what's going on in the streets. I love history, and I think that's probably why I got pulled into wanting to read the Bible or know the Bible, because to me, it's a history book that's actually proven, but history is usually always written on the victor side, or something sometimes people know that it's wrong, so they try to dismiss it in history. How the message went out from Jerusalem to all these different countries, all these different cultures, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Spaniards to Northern Africa to all these different places, and how the message spread around the world about Christ coming to earth to die for us. It doesn't matter who we are. We all know Christ loved me so much that he came to this earth to die for me. And even just thinking about the story about the Samaritan woman and how he not walked around that country or those group of people, he went straight through it and sat here and talked to the lady, which he knew in his culture, which was wrong, which if we can relate, it would be a Black kid talking to a white woman back in the 1930s or 20s, which would be, you cannot do, but he did it. He didn't care about what other people thought. He was going to do the right thing. And that was his message. I had the message of love, and his message of love was, like I said, going to the cross to die for us.